So I think we might as well begin. It's now 2:15. I want to welcome you here to our panel, which is called Hybrid TV, Delivering the Ultimate TV Experience, Broadcast, Cable Premium, and OTT Content. And if that panel name sounds familiar, there's probably like 12 panels that have similar sort of names here as well. But we are going to be talking about things from different perspectives. I want to not just welcome you here, but, you know, in the words of CNN, since we're being webcast, I want to welcome our viewers in the U.S. and around the globe. And before we begin, though, I have some questions for all of you, making sure you're paying attention to do this. So how many of you have cable or satellite services at home? Okay, and keep your hands up, though. How many of you also have a pay over-the-top service, whether it's something like Netflix or Hulu Plus? So the ones, keep your hands up if you have both, and the ones that dropped then did not. How many of you have? You can now put your hands down. How many of you have cut the cord and no longer have any cable or satellite? We have one over there. And how many, and probably not because it goes by an age demographic, how many of you never had a cord? Other than the umbilical cord, that is. I guess, well, you cut the cord. How many want to cut the cord? Okay, well, that's a good one. So for those of you that access over-the-top content, and I know you have probably a number of different devices, including your tablets, and et cetera, but in terms of access devices, rather than tablets and smartphones, in terms of the primary device that you use to access over-the-top content, how many use the features of the smart television, smart TV? One. How many rely on a game console, like PlayStation? Okay, we have three. How many have an over-the-top box, such as Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV? There's more in that category. How about an over-the-top stick, like Chromecast or the Roku stick? Well, got a few there too. And here's an interesting one. How many of you have a DVD player or Blu-ray player that also serves as your access point? And how many of you still watch DVDs or Blu-rays on that player? Okay, well, wow. More than I would have thought. So, there is a real changing landscape going on in this era that we live in. So, for example, Netflix now has over 50 million unique customer relationships around the world. By 2017, the number of over-the-top video-capable devices is supposed to exceed the number of people living in the world, and which is a pretty phenomenal number. Right now, Netflix accounts for 32% of all digital video subscriptions. Amazon Prime or Amazon Instant Video is 19%. Hulu Plus is 9%. And then you have a whole variety of services that obviously fall under that. And ComScore says that Apple TV and Chromecast are the most popular means of watching, accounting for 44% of all users that are viewing over-the-top programming through an extra device as opposed to just using your smartphone or your tablet. And those are followed by computers and gaming consoles at 27%, and Blu-ray players also at 21%. In terms of the viewing habits, and I got into a little bit of that before, especially with the lack of any cord nevers in the room, they really do, they're different based on your age group. So, for example, Nielsen's recently reported that the younger the viewer is, the less likely they are to be watching their over-the-top content on a television set, although still TV viewing dominates the other types, but it's much smaller. And millennials, for example, spend a third of their TV watching time viewing on computers, tablets, and smartphones. And of 18 to 34-year-olds, 20% say they don't subscribe to pay TV. More than half of these say they cut the cord and almost half say they never had a cord to begin with. So one thing we're going to try not to do much on this panel, which especially if you were here Monday when sort of the news broke out and every panel became a what is HBO Go and CBS All Access going to mean for the world? We're not really going to be focusing as much time and attention on that. We have a great group of panelists who are involved in the industry, more on the technology, the infrastructure, the data sides of it, as opposed to being services or content owners or creators. And so, and as well as being very strategic advisors in the industry. So we're going to get a broad understanding of sort of what happens under the hood versus what you necessarily see on your TV. And so I'd like to introduce the panel. First, my name is David Leibowitz. I'm managing partner of CH Potomac. I used to be a lawyer, but don't hold that against me. And I have interest in a variety of digital media companies. And mostly I spend a lot of time trying to have fun. And I thought I'd be watching the World Series with the Washington Nationals, but that's not happening this week. But let me now first turn over to Mark Jeffrey on my immediate left, your right, and tell us a little about who you are.
So my name is Mark Jeffrey. I work for Ericsson in what we call Group Function Technology, which is our CTO office, and I am focused on media strategies, typically 3 to 5 years out. But with regards to hybrid, it's all about transition. So looking a little bit closer in for some of these operators. One thing that I think I need to clear up, typically when I meet people and I say I work for Ericsson, they say, oh, the mobile phone company. And I say, no, we used to. Sony Ericsson was the last venture there, and we pulled out of that quite a long time ago. Our core business is, however, radio networks. And by radio, I mean mobile networks, services, and we have, as of late, been making a big push into media. It started with our acquisition of Tandberg, probably in the late 2000s, and then bumped up in frequency over the last couple of years with our acquisition of Media Room from Microsoft, acquisition of Azuki, acquisition of Fabrics and Red Bee, all in the pretty short term here.
So you're a pretty acquisitive company.
Yeah, and we basically take it to a higher level, right? We take a step back and say, where do we think the planet is going? And so we picked the year 2020 and believe that there's going to be 50 billion connected devices. And actually one of the things that we do in orientation is ask people, how many connected devices do you have? And if you look probably even a couple of years ago, people would say between 1 and 5 in a household. Well, my answer was 25. So the number of connected devices is growing very, very rapidly. Of course, some of those connected devices I don't actually use. I have Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, but I don't use them all. So anyway.
Well, thank you. Next, we have Brian Jaquith. And Brian is from Sling Media. I had mentioned to him earlier that for me, at least, the two most transformative products that I've had over the years have been my TiVo and my Sling box. And so I'm extremely happy to have you here.
Thanks, David. Yep. My name is Brian Jaquith. As David mentioned, Sling Media is the company behind the Sling box, which is a consumer electronics product that's actually great for all of you people because you're pay TV subscribers. It allows you to watch and control your living room TV on any of your mobile devices anywhere in the world. Live TV, recorded television, whatever you can do in the living room, you can do anywhere. I think that's one part of our business, obviously. Another part of our business is actually licensing the technology behind the Sling box to cable and satellite operators. Dish Network is a licensee of our technology. So if you have Dish Network and you have the Hopper DVR, you have Sling built into that to deliver that same experience. Also, we have a relationship with a company called Eris, who is a large media gateway and set-top box manufacturer for pay TV operators in the United States and worldwide. And they're making our technology available to their consumers as well. So we are going down a path of obviously delivering our products through retail channels, but also through pay TV operators. And we'll get into more of this, but we're also, in addition to just delivering the television experience, we're wrapping a lot of things around that to make it a better experience from a discovery standpoint, from a navigation standpoint, from a social media perspective. A lot of things both in the living room as well as when you're away from the living room that we can do to deliver a better television experience.
Thank you, Brian. Let me turn it over to Dan to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, Elant Group.
Hi, my name is Dan Sweeney. I'm, Western Division Vice President for the Elant Group, headquartered in Chicago with a big data analytics group in Boston as well. We're data analytics aggregators and integrators, and we focus in two areas: marketing and advanced advertising for companies like Comcast, NBC Universal, Charter, Cox Cable in the media space, and also in other verticals for companies like Avis, American Express, Nationwide. Company's been around for 30 years building products in both of those areas, as well as providing services, basically putting their back ends together with all the different types of data that they have in-house, and also with 50 other third-party data sources that we have partnerships with and agreements with to use to get demographic, psychographic information and cross-match those with ratings and other pieces of information, CRM and that type of thing. So one of the products that we have is called Audience Insights, which really does a great job of helping advertising buyers and sellers drive decisions based on set-top box data and cross-matching that with demographic data, so they know who to target and how frequently to pitch and the most effective way to communicate with. So that's what we do.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Let me turn it to Steve McKay from Mentone.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I'm Steve, CEO of Entone. Entone is a company we grew up focusing on IPTV and specifically managing the distribution of rich media around connected homes. And these days, really taking that to the next level, focusing on today's topic, hybrid TV, which is really combining the traditional TV services of operators who we serve with over-the-top and other rich media delivered over the internet, and then and also more and more focused on Internet of Things. So taking our first internet thing, which was the form of an IP set-top box, and adding adjacent products to that to enable a fully connected home for operators. About 150 operators in about 30 countries use us.
Thank you, Steve. Next we have AJ Dugar from Connected Consulting.
Hi, I'm AJ Dugar from Connected Consulting. We are a small boutique consult. We just started earlier this year by a group of us that have come out from the Hollywood studios and large post-production houses. Our focus is digital strategies, primarily multi-platform, multi-screen distribution, so OTT, IPTV, and all variations. And our focus has been on international markets. So we are working with companies that are based in the Asia-Pacific region, the Latin America and Eastern Europe, and more recently in the African continent, where we have basically either they are looking for penetration into the US markets or are looking for content for distribution in their own regions. So that's my focus. I myself used to work for a studio before and an entertainment technology company. And yeah, we're just focusing on OTT and these days.
Thank you, AJ. Last but not least is Xavier Koshar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Xavier. We have a company called the Video Genome Project. Came about for one reason only, because we thought the user experience around video content sucked. Curation, discovery, search. We thought that the user experience around so many other categories of goods and services was very robust, clean, rich, and we just thought that you can in many cases know the title of a video or a film or a TV show that you want to watch and still have difficulty finding it. And so it started off really as a passion of intellectual curiosity. Why does this problem exist? And why have so many other categories solve the problem? And really quickly, we came to the conclusion that it had to do with the metadata around and within the video content. In our space, unlike some of the other spaces, there had not been a organized, comprehensive, structured database of all video content metadata. A lot of that, there's a number of reasons for that, the least of which have to do with standards and tech stacks and organizational schemas. But we just thought that if you can curate so finely that you can get a personal experience for so many other categories, why is it the case that the category, I would argue, no, it's inarguable. Video content, users care more about than most anything else. We should be able to deliver that experience. So we set, the last 2 years, we've set to much the same way that NIH did outside of Potomac, with the human genome, we set to map the video genome, film, TV, and online video. And we just completed that. And now discovery, search, personalization, recommendation it's a step change. Consumers are probably not going to see this probably until 2015, as we're starting a lot of our partnership deals and integrations with many of the companies that these guys talked about, and a handful of these companies themselves. But we hope that pretty soon users are going to have a really rich user experience on video content.
Thank you. So the first question I have, the panel is titled Hybrid TV, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure if everybody thinks of what hybrid TV means the same way. So I'm going to ask each of you, sounds silly, what does hybrid TV mean to you?
Hybrid TV means transition to me. It means taking your traditional cable, satellite, and complementing that with IP delivered ABR video, or in one case we have a combination of DVB and multicast and ABR or HLS, in order to, at least in the cable space, transition consumers and programming more specifically from one side to the other. In the cable space, there's always been a want for a fully switched network, and there have been certain workarounds like switch digital broadcast in order to free up spectrum and only carry content when the consumers are asking for it. So you're really going from a push model to a pull model. And so being able to do that with the lesser, well, firstly with the VOD content and then with the lesser watched linear, slowly moving to the broadcast channels as soon as ABR multicast is enabled, then we'll be able to complete the switch. But it's also a lot about financing. Typically, the data side of the plant, the equipment and technologies are much more expensive than the QAM side, which are already paid for.
Brian, you see it the same way?
Well, I mean, there's some similarities. I think it's really about personalization. It's about delivering, the consumer doesn't care where the content's coming from. They want a rich experience across all screens, right? It used to be that it just was in the living room. Now consumers expect HD quality picture across their tablets, their smartphones, PCs, Macs, et cetera. And I think that the real key here is melding linear with on-demand with DVR-based content, so that actually a consumer wouldn't even know where the content's coming from. They want to visualize, they want to discover it, and maybe they want some personalization, some recommendations, or they know exactly what they're looking for, and then the content basically just gets fed, and it doesn't matter what device, doesn't matter what location, and then obviously wrapping around that and being able to have some really good metadata so that you can target, you can do advertising, you can do things that are important to supporting that industry as well, obviously, because you still do need that aspect.
How about you, Dan? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to top what these two have said already because you're asking what is
Only if you have another idea or disagree.
Well,
you can agree, and that's
well.
fine.
I guess what we're seeing is from our position is what the challenges are as a result of having all these different sources that I don't think is quite there with one uniform offering for a consumer. It still feels fragmented. You got to use different user interfaces. Even though, you know, to me, if Christmas morning came and somebody handed me a set-top box, it would have one unified user interface, and I would know the difference between Netflix and NBC. So to me, that's the ultimate. And I don't think I'll wake up on Christmas morning and open that present and see that box. But it's slowly but surely getting there. And what we see as an opportunity and also a challenge to the industry is the fragmentation that's taking place out there. I mean, we talk to advertising agencies and media companies all the time, and from their ad sales departments, and it's increasingly becoming difficult to aggregate these audiences when you have over-the-top services, Crackle, for example, crackle.com, and you have your traditional cable offering for ad sales, and then you got to go to broadcast to get something else there, and then there's the problems with TV everywhere that's not working completely properly, and as far as an ad sales position right now, it's getting there. But that's what we see as a big challenge that needs to be overcome, and of course, an opportunity for us.
So in large part, it's the monetization aspects.
Monetization, yeah.
Right. Steve?
Yeah, I agree with Mark's view that it's transition is the right word. All of us are working on the same problem, and it's a rare thing that we actually all know how it ends. And so we all know how it ends, which is this world that we've been talking about, digital Hollywood, for a decade now, which is that, you know, everything on demand from any device, anytime, any place, blah, blah, blah. It does end that way, and we all know it ends that way. And we none of us seem to be able to get out of our own ways and providing this to the end consumer. And so the end consumer knows that day will come. And in the meantime, hybrid TV is the best we've been able to come up with, which is, you know, you've had these parallel universes. We've had, you know, while traditional broadcast TV was working on this amazing new idea, which was video on demand, in the meantime, this parallel universe sprouted up, which was with Netflix and Vudu. And for several years, they literally existed as parallel universes. And now we're trying to bring them together. And the best we've been able to do is this concept of hybrid TV, which will then go away and never be discussed again, because we'll have this day that we all talked about, which is everything on demand, anyplace, anytime, anywhere.
But we'll still have panels.
And we'll have panels to talk about other issues.
2.0.
AJ?
Just to add to what's been said so far. So, you know, in my mind, hybrid TV is anything that's anti-linear TV or traditional, what we think of as traditional. So initially it was linear TV, and then people moved to time-shifted television. And then it was video on demand. I think the way where it's headed today, of course, we see television, the whole, you know, TV everywhere space, where it doesn't matter what screen or platform where you are. But taking even a step further from that, I think where this is all headed to is, you know, hyper personalization. So not just personalization as in targeted ads or targeted content based on recommendations engines, but taking a piece of content or news and breaking it down into its minutest elements and then recreating it at the device level based on your interests and focuses. And that leads to the Genome Project also, actually. You know, it's so dependent on metadata, where I think, you know, in a few years' time, we will, you know, there's so much noise in content consumption today. Like, I would say 75 to 80% of what we see and hear every day, we didn't really ask for it. It was pushed to us. So the whole notion of pulling what's right for me from metadata and in creative ways of using content breakdown is where we are headed to.
Thanks. I'm going to have some follow-up questions to some of the things that have been commented upon. I want Xavier to tell us what he thinks.
I agree with what was said earlier. This is, I'm actually really surprised for Digital Hollywood panel. Everyone said something unique and I think correct. So I agree with these guys have said before, but I'll add a different perspective, which is for the same reason that you see so much innovation, the barriers to entry to get in. By the way, 20 years ago, even as it relates to a data company, when you used to, sorry, I have a cough drop, but when you used to think of data companies, even at conferences like this, you think of companies like Oracle or Microsoft or what have you, right? These days, two guys that came up with an app are a data company, okay? That's phenomenal because now innovation is no longer just as a result of hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D with these big companies. That's the good news. And because of that, we've seen some great things. Uber, and I mean, you guys know all that. Here's the complication for that. Technology grew faster than standards. So what's happened, even on this panel, what's happened is you have all of this great innovation. People are working on, well, let's take social media as an example, right? Facebook, YouTube, and what have you. They all have unique tech stacks. And I tell you, I manage engineers. Recruiting for that is amazingly difficult because you go, okay, well, we're doing this. And you say, oh, well, I have a different expertise with respect to tech stacks. But it's not just tech stacks. One of the things is, even as we talked about, someone was talking about integration. Integration is absolutely the key. Whoever said that we all know how the story ends, I agree with that. But that's okay. We all knew how Titanic ended too, and we still all went like 1 million times to watch it, mostly teen girls. We don't know how how it's necessarily gonna get there, but because of the lack of standardization, because it's so easy to come up with literally the next killer app, now everyone uses Waze. Okay, how is that gonna impact and integrate? 5 years ago, we weren't talking about Roku's. Now it's part of it. How is that going to integrate? So much of this, to your question about hybrid TV, yeah, I agree with something else. I think it was Mark or somebody said that it's, or maybe Brian has said that users don't care. They just know that there's video out there. And by the way, when I started in the business, we used to call it film and TV. Now, by the way, you guys know it's called video. It's not film and TV. It's now video because nobody cares about that. I wanted the other day, did you guys hear about this hoax, the Banksy hoax thing? Banksy got arrested. There was a hoax earlier this week. I wanted to see some video on that. I truly did not care whether it came from BuzzFeed or CNN or wherever, okay? So the concept of hybrid TV is just accessing this video. And to AJ's point, we have the technology now. It's not yet integrated. It's not yet, totally consumerized or even productized, but we have the technology now to super and hyper personalize things. Like literally, I'll say this, because I know I'm going long. I'll say this one quick anecdote. We were playing around with some personalization products at our company, and I had the staff there and our staff, and I said, God, this is deja vu. Where have I seen this? Because we have this product where you can literally, in music, there's like I think Beats has popularized that I'm doing this right now and this, what's a playlist that makes sense? So we've been able to do that with video. And I said, oh my God, where have I seen this before? This is deja vu. And it finally hit me. The Jetsons. There was an episode of The Jetsons when I was growing up as a kid in syndication where Jane, the mom, was tucking in Elroy to bed. I don't know if anyone remembers this. If anyone remembers this, come meet me afterwards and I'll give you something for free. I'll give you access to our API for free. And Jane says to Elroy, what would you like to dream about tonight, Elroy? And this, because there's this Dream-O-Matic 3000. And it's like cowboys and Indians, space invaders and all that. And, it's what he's feeling in that moment, hyper-personalization. And he goes, Rocket Ranger. And she pushes a button and he gets that dream, okay? I thought about it, I'm like, oh my God. By the way, that cartoon was made in 1963. 1963, I didn't even know the Jetsons was that old. 1963, more than 50 years later, we're just now developing the technology to actually make that a reality. And I think that to me, that is like call it hybrid TV, call it whatever, but that is amazing that that's in our generation that's gonna happen.
That's fantastic. Let me get back to the we'll know where it's going to end, but nobody's able to get out of their way to make it happen. What are the roadblocks? And if you feel comfortable sort of identifying who you think are creating those roadblocks towards making a more complete unified experience happen.
I think part of it's the consumer. Who owns the consumer, right? Because you have, Netflix with a subscription, or me with a subscription to Netflix. You have my content provider or service provider who wants to be my portal into the video world. Then you have my TV manufacturer. When I turn it on, and maybe instead of looking for cable first, they say, oh, here are the apps, and your service provider is just one of the apps there. So I think there's a big struggle or fight for who wants to be the face to the consumer, and that's slowing things down.
Finally, it's not technology. Finally, for years and years, it used to be technology. Now it's not technology. It's commercial considerations, primarily commercial and strategic considerations. As an example, I told you, we have powerful video recommendation technology. When you go to Netflix, and as soon as you finish watching House of Cards, what do they recommend?
Next episode.
After the series, what, like similar series?
Another one of their shows. Orange is
Bingo.
the New Black.
Orange is the Next Black, right? There's so many rights issues. There's all those commercial issues. I think, I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks. I think those are the biggest limitations. Rights, who has deals with whom, when they expire, even talent can get involved in this type of stuff. But the technologists, we are chomping at the bit for the strategists and the commercial things to go away. And by the way, we all know just because the technology is there, that doesn't mean anything. This commercial stuff and the strategy stuff has to be fixed. Remember 30 years ago, Betamax and VHS. So
That's right. I think the pipe is a stumbling, not a stumbling block, but I think that a lot of this is obviously being delivered over IP. You have to have this move from linear to over the top. I mean, you're still paying for content, right? You're just paying in a different way, right? The one individual who I don't know if he's still here or not, but that said that he was a cord cutter. I was going to ask him, how much are you paying for your standalone broadband service? Because I think the financial models are the real challenges. Whether it's windowing of content, whether it's the pipe, whether it's the distribution of content, whether it's exclusivity, because now you've got all these OTT apps that all have their own exclusive content. Because what does exclusive content do? It draws people to their service, right? So Netflix has their shows, Amazon has their shows, Hulu Plus has their shows now. Redbox, who didn't have any exclusive content, is now pretty much no longer, right? So I think that. And I also think that, that what you didn't have back that you have today, obviously, is you have these networks of services that are able to compete in an economies of scale perspective, are able to compete with the large broadcast networks, the large content owners. I don't know that we're there yet, but YouTube has shown in a number of ways that they can broadcast or simulcast or multicast live events to a very, very broad audience in the millions and millions, whereas it wasn't too long ago that you had that technological stumbling block that you could not deliver over IP to the same numbers that a broadcast could do to the Super Bowl or the Academy Awards or what have you.
Well, by the way, before I ask or make another comment, are there any additional comments on the question? Or no? Okay. When you talk about the pipes, there is an inherent limitation in the size, but also with 4K content coming, that's going to be an issue. Coupled with the fact that some services, like Netflix, has made deals to make it easier or faster for their content to be into certain homes based on what companies they have their deals with on the broadband side. So when you say that we all know how it's going to end, I'm still not sure, based on what I've heard about the obstacles, who's going to make it end? Who's going to make it get there? I mean, if there's always going to be some haves and there'll be other, entrenched positions, and you talked about so many different entrenched positions there, from the TV manufacturer to the cable operator to the broadband provider to the services themselves. What's going to happen to make everybody say, aha, we should all work together and play nice and really work for the consumer?
Well,
That's not
that
going to
was-
happen.
That part's not going to happen. All right.
Not going to happen. So since I'm the one that said we all know how it ends,
Yeah,
I mean, we all know how it ends, but what's not going to happen is everyone getting together and playing nicely. The technology, most of us are technology providers, we'll sort that out. Most of it is sorted out today. 4K, things like that throws a wrench in the works. But the stakes are so huge. Just the subscriber revenue globally for pay TV today is almost $500 billion. It's just a gigantic amount of the global economy. By far the world's dominant form of entertainment, right? And one of the largest micro economies in the world. And so the stakes are so high, the stakeholders are so strong, and everyone is going to protect their position here. And so nobody is going to play nicely and say, hey, let's all sit together, sing Kumbaya, and sort this all out. And so you'll have companies like Apple that will do very well around a walled garden, and that is the best experience out there because it's a walled garden. For everyone else, it's trying to deal with the lack of standardization out there. It's going to be a really rough experience, I think, for a couple of decades. For Ericsson and Entone, companies that sell to the operators, this is good news because it means that the operators survive for a long, long time and have the opportunity to, for a relatively low subscription, make it a relatively easy and experience for the consumers. And so, but we all know how it ends, but no one's going to sit down together and say, okay, let's make this easy. It's just not going to happen.
Will any of us be alive when it ends?
Yeah, we will, but barely.
Stay healthy.
Barely.
Right.
I think we're talking, personally, I'll say as the oldest and most curmudgeonly person up here, I'll say it's 25 years to get this sorted out.
I think one thing that I've learned, especially working in the video space since 1998, I was responsible for a video server, IP video server in 1998, and Netflix came out of the chute and they were delivering DVDs, and I'm streaming over IP. And I thought mailing DVDs was a silly business model. But what I didn't realize was they had a 10, 12-year window to come up with something else. So I think that the windows are often much, much longer than you think they're going to be. I think that, MPEG-2 is going to be around a lot longer than people give it credit for, and a lot of these technologies. And so therefore hybrid, even though I believe in a lot of cases it's an interim solution to get around carriage deals and things like that, I think that it's just a way of life. We're not going to get around it. And so it won't be done when we're live.
You're seeing businesses hedge, right? I'll just say, you're seeing businesses hedge, and not to go to the HBO thing, but you're seeing businesses hedge against, what is traditional versus what they feel are maybe a more direct relationship. And you're seeing everyone look at the direct relationship that Netflix has of 50 million some odd subscribers, where they can charge a certain amount of dollars a month, and then use that income obviously to make their own content and license other content. But that hedging, I think, is there because you have these huge businesses, as you pointed out, that just can't be disrupted in a day, right? And there's too much at stake. But at the same time, you have to kind of do a little bit of this, a little bit of that to make sure that you can move forward as well. I'll let you go, AJ.
Sure.
AJ?
I was just so I'm going to take a bit of a contrarian approach, and I can do that now because I don't work for a large corporation anymore. So first of all, I think none of us really knows how it's going to end. If you truly think about the definition of what the end even is, and second of all, the notion of kumbaya, we've as much as none of the companies really want to do it because everyone's looking out for their own shareholders. But we've seen over the last decades, companies have come together, whether or not they liked it. So if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't have MVPDs and MSOs offering OTT-like services or OTT services today, right? 5 or 6 years ago, some of these same companies had said no way ever. So we're seeing they're having to do that, not out of choice, but because they see money is being left on the table and it's literally being snatched away from them by the new so-called new media, new distribution types. So I think the point I was trying to make is that I think that in the next few years there will come a time when this revenue erosion, as the way it's continuing right now, will lead to these companies saying, you know what, even though I hate you, I'd be open to sitting down with you and figuring out a way to do something collaboratively.
Yeah, the reason why I think we know notionally. Okay, so let's qualify. We know notionally how it'll end is because eventually the consumer always wins. Eventually the consumer always wins. Period. Full stop. End of story. If you don't believe me, ask some record industry executives about that. Right? If consumers have tasted what frictionless consumption is like, there's kind of no going back from that, right? Now, you're right, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, is it gonna start with mailing of DVDs, et cetera? But eventually, consumers will their feet. And by the way, the younger consumers and demographics, obviously, I mean, we'll probably have a whole nother session on millennials and Gen Zs, but they don't really care about any of this stuff. They'll go wherever it's easiest, wherever the user experience is richest, wherever they can get their stuff. And they've already tasted that. They've already tasted a little bit of that. And eventually when they go, so does their money. And where their money goes, to AJ's point, trust me, even different mob families come together when it's about the money. And so ultimately users will, again, sorry, I'm thinking a little very kind of new economy like apps, but even as it relates to like a company like Uber, that actually created less friction in getting services for cars. Okay, who knows if that's gonna how it's gonna end up looking, but how do you go back from that now? Right? And if it's demonstrated that there's money, that is users or consumers will be willing to pay for something, trust me, the guys on this panel and we'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to extract money if users are someplace, and people will come together. So that's why notionally we know how it'll end.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things. First, earlier in my career, I was EVP and General Counsel for the Recording Industry Association of America. So we could talk about where the consumer was, et cetera, but that'll be another discussion and it'll be offline. But when you say the consumer always wins, I think while it's probably fair to say that there's a lot of dissatisfaction in terms of some of the kludgy type approaches to get the content you want, although it's getting better, I think it's more like the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you'll get what you need. So I'm not sure that the consumer, they have to be violently upset and angry for you to have that transformation.
Well, they'll just vote with their feet. They'll just eventually.
Well, but where are they going to go?
Huh?
Where will they go?
Eventually, some innovative company and maybe a disruptor will give them another choice. And because barriers to entry are low, and now you can get to a consumer, but you could not get to a consumer easily 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Tomorrow, Instagram as an example. I was reading something about that just two days ago. 2.5 years ago, there was no Instagram. You can get to users very easily now. So there will be a choice.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to monopolize it. Do you have other comments on that? If not, I may monopolize it a little bit more, but. No, I mean,
I would just say, there are disruptive companies. Sling Media was considered a disruptive company when we first came out with the Sling Box. Aereo is considered a very disruptive company more recently when they delivered a service to take over the air channels and deliver it down to your mobile devices. And we know the fate of Aereo.
Well, not yet.
We don't know. That's true. We don't know yet, but we know the interim fate. Yeah.
No, but now we have the FCC looking into whether OVPs, MVPDs, right? And if they go that way, then there's big changes in store.
Yeah, I think also that we also got a glimpse of how successful. Aereo made a lot of noise. We got a glimpse of how successful Aereo was as well. And the reality is that while consumers, I think, love the idea, I don't know that a huge amount of them flocked and signed up for the service as well.
Yeah, I think Aereo certainly was disruptive. The fact of the FCC looking at some of it, I think, can have an impact, and certainly what they want to achieve is a valuable item. But earlier in my career, even before RIAA, I was the advisor to the Register of Copyrights that administered the cable compulsory license and wrote those regs and forms, and so that could be another discussion. But getting back to some of the points that AJ talked about, when you talk about hybrid excluded linear, which took out sports, took out event type of activities, whether it's at Emmys, Oscars, or even Dancing with Stars, where people like to talk and share information while those things are going on. As well as even when CBS All Access is not just about getting, the library of content or getting earlier episodes, but also live TV and through SyncBack, which is a partner that's delivering the local TV station live feeds. I mean, why don't you consider that part of the hybrid environment?
So there's always going to be an element of live TV that I think will probably never go away, and sports is a perfect example of that. What the point I was trying to make is that the evolution of consumer behavior as with regard to content consumption in the living room has gone through a change where linear isn't so much as you're sitting down in front of the TV at 9 p.m. watching your show or even a live game. You can watch that live game elsewhere, right? On a handheld device.
But it's still linear if you're watching it.
Yeah.
It's still linear. So sports is an exception for sure, but I think for most other content types, linear, the meaning of linear has changed, and it's no longer about watching.
Well, I think there's a differentiation you need to make between live and linear, right? Linear is
yes.
scheduled VOD basically, and live is live.
That's true.
Yeah, the concept of linear will go away here pretty shortly.
For a large percentage of the content.
I think so, and and live will exist. But we have deployments of hybrid TV in 25, 30 countries. One, to me anyway, great example is in Brazil, where with Telecom Italia Mobile, they are actually, as an operator, bringing Netflix to Brazil, right? So it's a great example of Netflix. I think every operator makes this conscious decision. Do I want to try to work with or against, in this case, Netflix? So they, as a large operator, 80 million mobile phone subscribers, said, hey, we have the heft Netflix to bring you into Brazil where you've not been successful. And they are complementing that with free over the air. Now, in the case of Brazil, like a lot of the rest of the world, there's a fantastic variety of content available, in this case, over terrestrial networks. And so they will bundle that with a broadband internet. To me, it's the ultimate hybrid TV example in that. Take my broadband internet, take my premium broadband internet, and I will put a tuner in your device that allows you to get all this fantastic over-the-air content. And that will be married with Netflix, the world's by far most successful over-the-top platform. It's a great example of hybrid. There's a little bit of linear, a little bit of on-demand, but to the consumer, that distinction starts to go away, and they'll watch a whole lot of soccer/football live, right? And so extremely, extremely valuable live content in Brazil around football.
Yeah. But it's still the user experience is still fragmented, even in that simple example.
But less so in that it's a single device, single remote control, single user interface. I mean, still fragmented. You're right. Once you go into Netflix, you got to get out and all that stuff. But it's a interesting.
I mean, I would argue, David, you brought this up. I would argue that the concept of appointment TV, while it went through a little bit of a malaise there for a number of years when DVRs came out and popularized the fact that you could time shift anything and watch it on your time. But I would argue that social has actually brought a lot of that back. Now, not for everyone, and there's a few different ways. But you look at programs that have that great kind of social media value, where everyone wants to watch it when everyone else is watching it. Either whether it be for spoiler alerts, or they want to basically watch the conversation going on, or they don't, or they want to participate in the conversation. Game of Thrones is a huge example of that. Breaking Bad at the end of their season is a huge example of that. Even Mad Men, Walking Dead, these are all shows that everyone wants to watch at the same time. AMC and other cable nets make Walking Dead and those types of shows available at the same time, whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, the 6 o'clock slot on the West Coast, the 9 o'clock slot on the East Coast. So you can have that kind of experience. And obviously sports, does that naturally, because the World Series is on at 8 o'clock tonight, 5 Pacific. It's not tape delayed like it was maybe back in the day, but it's not tape delayed on the West Coast. And I think that social really drives a lot of that, what we call linear or we call live TV, whether it be live sports, live events, or actually appointment television now. And I think there's a real opportunity for a number of different players in this space around that aspect where, prime time is social time. People like to basically be on their tablets while they're watching on their living room TV, or in our case, we like to say, if you're not in front of the living room TV, our solution delivers that experience to you on your tablet, even if you can't be there, and you can watch it on your own time as well.
So let me go to monetization again. We talked a little bit about the advertising and the issues associated with it. Are there now better means to sort of accurately identify and track what people are watching so that could be counted against for advertising dollars? And, how are companies like Roku just announced that they're building their own advertising network? I don't know whether it's for the lesser popular channels, where they don't have enough numbers individually to make it worthwhile, or they're going to try to include, some of the others as well. And I know, Brian, you're doing some things there as well. Where do we talked about how we may not get there until 25 years. How soon are we going to have advertising that's more personalized, targeted, and effective in effectively monetizing the space?
That's all starting to happen now, but there's a ways to go on that. And the fragmentation is out there, and there's a lot of proprietary systems and the lack of standards that we talked about earlier. So it's a big old mess out there. But there's no one-stop shop where I, as an advertiser, can go and get my ad placed. I want it on all these OTT services and these cable networks and these broadcast networks. It's all fragmented in that regard, that they have to look at different audience measurements of sorts. So that's why companies like us aggregate all that information so we can get closer to allowing advertising sellers and buyers to get to that ultimate place that you're talking about.
Yeah, there was an interesting announcement today between Nielsen and Adobe along those lines. I mean, my gut is that advertising is a big deal. I mean, you're looking at online content, which grew up with banner ads, click-throughs, impressions, and things like that. And you're talking about $500 billion, of which a third of it's probably advertising revenue, right? And that has to transition from one place with premium to another place that grew up with user-generated content. And so there's not a real clear way to get from point A to point B. But now that we are getting premium content from Netflix, even though it's a subscription model, yet on Hulu, you have the option between subscription and advertising, and non-skippable advertising, right? Which is very important. And you can get the analytics. I think that one thing that it has proved, that if you deliver premium content online, the money will transition over too. And although it's not an apples to apples comparison, I heard a recent comparison between the ad rates for Big Bang Theory on TV versus online, and it's still off by a factor, but it's much closer than it was.
It's closer than, what was it, Jeff Zucker that said digital dimes? Was that?
Yeah, much closer.
Well, I think the CPMs are higher online, right? I mean, there's less inventory, but the CPMs are higher. But it's back to, I follow the money, and you will always follow. What's in the way of making everyone work well together is follow the money. And so Roku's a good example. Roku's always, they're out there selling devices. They're like giving away like free toasters, like, hey, just run over my broadband network. Now you want to sell advertising. Well, Roku, I'm going to take that a little personally now, right? Because I wanted the customer analytics. I wanted the customer data. I wanted to sell advertising to those customers. So when you were just a device in the home carrying other people's content, that you weren't a threat to me. You didn't bother me, and now you do. And so Google wants all the analytics, right, so that they can sell advertising. Now, smallish companies like Roku want to do that. TiVo wants to do that. The operators want to do that. They're not going to get together and say, hey, let's sit down, let's have a sit down and we'll sort this all out. It's going to be
in the case of a Roku, at least, they have hundreds and hundreds of channels available of programming from smaller players. No disrespect in terms of that description, but who would be willing to get whatever they can if somebody else is going to organize them collectively form a means. I mean, yes, the Hulu Pluses of the world or the Crackles may not necessarily want that, but a lot of the smaller ones, it may be the only way that they really have an effective way. And if they had the analytics, I mean, if you're a smaller company, yeah, the analytics might be useful, but I don't know. Do you think it would be something where they say, no, we don't want to, and partner with you because we'd love to get that data ourselves, but again, we're not large enough to really.
I think the whole
build
idea
the
is,
business.
just taking the Roku example, is they're offering an opportunity for these little players, these little apps, to get some front page viewership. So when I, as a consumer, turn on my Roku device, there's a big banner out there that says, watch, Ted's little channel. And then might even put a pointer to it. They're going to put in some of
I
those
think
tricks.
it's survival of the fittest, something that didn't really exist in traditional television because of bundles.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of the traditional 300 channels that I get over cable shouldn't be around anymore because they don't get enough viewership. So I think that this is a way of them weeding themselves out.
And those same content owners are going to, they're going to utilize the Roku network. They're going to utilize any other platform that, any other, 10, 15 other platforms that they're putting their content on. And like you said, it's because they don't have a choice, right? They basically have to generate the revenue that's necessary. So, I mean, I think that Roku's doing a great job of having the eyeballs and having the breadth of customers now where they can go out there and they say, hey, we can deliver value, we can deliver customization, we can point advertising to the right people watching the right content, and from the content owner's perspective, there's nothing else they're going to do.
On this point on monetization, let me offer a different cut of a different look at it. So the last company we built, it was in the media and advertising space, and we worked with biggest advertisers, heads of media, CMOs. There's a very strange disincentive on that side of the house, not on this side, not on the technology side, not a little bit on the publishing side, but on the agency and the advertiser side, especially as it relates to brand advertising, which is still, there's brand advertising, performance advertising. When you think like Coca-Cola is sponsoring the Olympics or AT&T is buying American Idol, okay? And what that weird disincentive is, has to do with scale. And it's almost like the system, the buying system, does not support too long a tail for this, because you have to understand, if the holy grail, as we all talked about on content, is personalization, right? The whole Elroy thing, what do you want to dream about? That's also the holy grail if you're an advertiser, right? Getting the exact right marketing message to that person, which may be different. Or is it? How costly is that to do that, right? First of all, you have to understand, okay? Agencies, they have to understand the difference between a Roku buy and a Slingbox buy and a Comcast buy and working with the Video Genome Project and all that. That is complicated. 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, you just had to know, Mike Shaw at ABC. You just had to know the top 5, or whatever, the scale. That's why to this day, especially as it relates to digital advertising, where most of the money still goes? Yahoo. It goes to Google, right? Now, Google opened up an entirely new pie 10 years ago with AdSense and AdWords. But you know what that pie was? That wasn't the big advertisers. That was the long tail. That was the plumber, right? For this to work, it has to be programmatic. It has to be systematized and automatic, but still the big buckets of money on the advertiser side, they'll hear all this stuff and be like, oh, I totally get it. This makes sense, personalized, this and that. Yeah, we're just going to buy American Idol anyway, right? And that we've got to fix, I don't know. I just posed a problem with no solution, which I always tell my staff never do, but I just did. So
there's always a solution. Maybe 25 years down the road.
Well, we know how it's going to end, right? So anyway, so that we've got on the other side, the advertiser and the agency side. I mean, by the way, a similar thing happened with click fraud. So you guys know that there's with respect to actually measuring impressions and all that digitally, So, you know, it's massive. It's been massively wrong for a long time. There's a ton of click fraud, either malicious or not. But everyone's kind of known about it. And do you know why nothing's really been done about it? Because everybody benefits in the ecosystem. Like everybody, like it's almost the advertiser. I don't want to know. All I know is that well, advertisers care, but the people where you can actually measure it, the publishers, what are they going to say? Hey, media buyers, just so you know you spend $1 million and you're expecting, let's say, 100 million impressions. Truth is, I only delivered you 60 million impressions. Would you like your money back? No. You have to create some sort of incentive. Anyway, that's the other side of the monetization piece, is that personalized advertising is still very difficult from the other side. The brand advertisers will still always buy scale. We used to do that all the time. We used to take these types of companies, and the CMO's eyes would light up, and they'd look at their agency and they'd say, like, how many users do they have? 100,000. Love to help you. Here, we'll do a little test. What are we going to do? Yeah, like that doesn't even show up on our needle, let alone move it.
So basically, there was an old adage, I don't know if it sounds like it may still be accurate today, which is that an advertiser never lost their job by buying a television.
It was in Cincinnati, the P&G. No one at P&G ever lost their job buying a 30-second spot.
And so I guess some of that fear is still inherent in
It used to be, you'll never get fired for greenlighting a movie with Tom Cruise, right? It's that same type of thing. So hats off, by the way, to you can't it would be not prudent for an advertiser to go, all right, I'm getting out of TV and I'm putting all my money in Roku or whatever. That wouldn't be prudent. But a lot of innovative marketers, especially like what Joe Tripodi, who's a CMO of Coke, what a lot of advertisers are starting to do, they're saying, okay, this ratio that he used, 70% of my dollars are going to go in the tried and true, the boring stuff, the stuff that's not going to be on the cover of, above the fold of Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch or whatever. 20% is going to be on the digital stuff that's pushing it, and the last 10%, 5 to 10%, will be, okay, sure, we'll try this in-game app thing. It's not, and it's that sort of portfolio theory across, their Japanese karetsu of partnerships. It's that type of portfolio theory that, and then once some stuff works, they'll double down on it. It's a slow process, but it'll get there.
Fine. Did you want to say something, or?
I was just saying, we in that whole model, we haven't even talked about social, right? I mean, there's maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 15% of the budget now, right? Which is something you never thought of before. But clearly, Facebook and others are making money from advertisers that are using their networks, especially across mobile. So that's one of the areas.
Can I ask you a question? You talk about Facebook. Does anybody use Facebook off of a smart TV or a Roku player, a streaming player? No.
I use it for a screensaver for pictures on my Roku.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nice.
So the only guy here.
The UX is very difficult on the big screen. Yeah, on
my
big
personal
screen,
pictures, not my friends' pictures. I could care less about that.
No,
stuff.
why, I'm curious why you're asking that question. I think the UX is very difficult on a big screen, so that's why, if it was easier to use, then maybe people would. But
Well, because they seem to show up as an app on all these platforms, and I scratched my head and you mentioned Facebook, and I was thinking of a hybrid set-top box. Like Facebook you can get on a Comcast set-top box.
Right.
But who uses Facebook on a
Well, it's like a
big
Twitter
screen
feed,
TV?
like Twitter app, right? It's like a feed on your TV. That real estate on the TV can be used, I think, much more effectively.
It was when you were talking about social,
Yeah.
and that's why I asked about it, since it's hybrid
absolutely.
TV.
And there's
So
a couple of
not
apps
everything belongs
that
there.
use Facebook for on the TV for what they call social movie watching. So there's this independent movie, I think IndieFlix, I think is the name of it, where if you have the Facebook app downloaded or installed on your TV and you're watching a movie through their app, now it shows you which of your friends are also watching or on that app or watching the same movie as you are, and you can chit chat with them about the movie.
Okay.
So that could be one use case of of even wanting to install Facebook on your TV.
Sorry.
Let me.
I'm the naysayer.
That's
We
Bad
have
idea.
around
So
10 minutes
not
left.
everything works in a hybrid box is my point. So,
But you know, experimentation is important.
Yeah, it is.
So we find out what sticks and what doesn't stick. We have 10 minutes left. I'd love to open it up to the audience. And boy, either you are, we're doing such a great job, you've sort of fallen asleep, or you're very shy. So, so we'll just continue then. So in the area of content and content creation, you're seeing a lot more exclusive content being actually produced by whether it's Netflix, Amazon, et cetera. I mean, how important is that going forward for these services? Because it costs a lot of money.
it is, but it's a way to drive somebody to your service or your product. I worked for Showtime back in the 80s, and you know, we did original programming, and that was just pulling eyeballs in, and it's nothing new. Network TV's done it for decades, and with their the stars they would sign for long-term contracts and build product around them, so on. So it's an old formula that continues to be used today. I don't see anything really new and exciting in that area, except maybe the way that they buy it. I think the example is Netflix and buying House of Cards without ever seeing any kind of a pilot. You know, they just bought it on a gut.
Yeah, I think it's much more just take a little bit of the other side of that. I think it is the ultimate, by far, the ultimate value creator in everything that we're talking about so far. And Netflix has come to that realization. And it's very expensive. It's hard to underwrite really high quality programming, and so you have to have very deep pockets. But the Netflix, you know, was a very smart company, saw this early on and committed serious capital to it, and it's all about what HBO is doing with their announcement this week. Right? They'd have no leverage whatsoever to attempt what they announced this week if it wasn't for the original content that they have.
But to that point, this is how you build a network. This is how you, like, this is not even the Showtime day or HBO. I mean, especially now more than ever, I think it is, although it's tough to get there, the path, if you have a sea of service providers, content distributors, basically access points for a user to get to video content, what's the criteria that a user is going to use? Like, how are they going to start to get there? Well, you need to have, like, the reason why Netflix is such an amazing business for the street is because it's predictable, recurring subscription revenue. That is that's better than transactional. You can plan for everything, right? So how do you get people to continually subscribe to something? User experience has to be like solid, but the number one thing is exclusive content. Now, what is the only way you can really guarantee exclusive content? Well, you can buy it, you can license it. But if something really, really works, do you think that content owner is going to let you make all the money off of that? No, they'll license it and they'll raise license fees indefinitely, which, by the way, you've seen with affiliate fees and what have you.
They'll do that at that kumbaya sitting.
Yeah, right. They'll do that, right.
Raise our fees.
Yeah, shake your hand and then stab you in the back. But so the ultimate way to guarantee exclusivity of great content is if you make it yourself. But you can't start, to your point about it's expensive to make high quality content. So how do you make high quality content? How do you eventually get to that? It's a slow and steady race. First, you got to get the users. How do you get the users? Almost every network has been built this way, off of other people's content. You get the users because you license other people's content. And then once they start coming there in a recurring fashion, you start taking some of your cash flow and putting it in a little kitty and making little bets. If you happen to, sometimes you get really lucky and those bets pay off early. Sometimes they don't. Okay, HBO, does anyone remember like the first initial content for original content? It was a bunch of crap, right? It wasn't until really the 90s that they started to hit. And then once something hits, then you can reinvest. But ultimately, I think because there's so many access points, exclusive content is going to be one of, if not the most important differentiator.
Well, look, I mean, Netflix proved the back catalog had value, right? And the back catalog was not expensive. right? So to your point about making, investing wisely in the back catalog, building eyeballs, and then being able to take that and then transform it into, you know, whether it be the four movie deal with Adam Sandler, which, you know, you can
Right.
debate up or down, you know, how impactful that will be, or Arrested Development actually did not pull in many subscribers at all. I mean, these are all things that are trying to make, you know, we talked about this so many times, you know, Netflix or any other service, the sticky services, right? Services that basically keep you, you know, you don't even care about the $9. You don't even care, you know, Netflix could charge $8 or $9 back then because the back catalog didn't cost a lot of money. And then they had a huge backlash in 2012 when they decided to raise rates and split off the company because they needed more revenue, because they needed to basically spend that money on really, really good content. You know, Amazon is actually pretty intriguing to me because it's a different kind of way of doing pilots, right? They have the pilot season, people can vote on it. You know, you're kind of looking forward to things that are actually, you know, coming out, whether it be comedies or dramas. But I thought that was kind of a pretty unique way to, you know, kind of turn the pilot seat on its head, if you will.
One comment about Adam Sandler. One of the reasons I understand that Netflix is that he is extremely popular in international markets, and you know, they are. I wouldn't say that Netflix is saturated here in the U.S., but they are definitely looking elsewhere for their growth, and I think that's a big part of the strategy. We do have one question over there, and please identify yourself and speak loud since we're on webcast.
About 10 years ago, before the advent of smartphones, Verizon launched a streaming media service with high quality content in conjunction with Qualcomm, your DCAS service. I guess the question is why, Mark in particular, and others who may have knowledge and opinion, why did it fail? And given today's environment, could it possibly succeed?
I think it's all about timing. You see in the media space, you see time and time again, like with H.264, for example, there were a lot of companies that were working on encoding for H.264, and it took so long to actually roll out because you need all pieces of the ecosystem to be bought in, you know, like with HD, for example, the camera all the way through the TV, the set-top box, everything. And so a lot of companies that are in it before their time, unfortunately, don't succeed. But you know, my big, in my role looking at things, we may have looked into a technology 6 months ago and it may not have been viable, but looking at it now and the way that the market's changing so quickly, it could be viable. So you have to keep on top of these things.
You're referencing the Media Flow product? That's right. So what I understood is the main failure for that was there were only 2 handsets that were available to actually receive the service, 2 or 3 maybe. And the screens were they were little screens.
They're flip phones.
Yeah, I mean, it was before this came out, right?
I also think that screen sizes were
Yeah,
important.
it was too small. In fact, you find there's a lot of statistics out there about the bigger the screen, the more video consumption that the consumer has. So that was what I understood was single biggest problem is not enough devices.
But then you needed the bandwidth also, right?
Well,
But they had the
that
transmitters
wasn't-
for
The
that.
media flow was not over IP. It was
No.
over.
that wasn't an issue.
Like an antenna built into the phone.
But the same problem that Media Flow has is what mobile DTV has today, and that is that yes, you can get the phones, but unless the carriers are behind it, you know, whether or not a Samsung or an LG or a Sony, formerly Sony Ericsson, wants to manufacture that device, if the telco is not going to buy that and deliver it, you know, sell it and subsidize it for their consumer, you're not going to have a business there.
Well, and let's not also forget marketing, right? As technologists, you know, we're just so thrilled that we're able to do something, and then maybe the commercial guys are thrilled because we came up with the right business model. But I mean, hasn't Steve Jobs told us technology and all that doesn't, like, you have to market it? I mean, the MP3 player was around for a long time. We, like, consumers still like advertising, marketing, that still works. That service I felt was marketed extremely poorly for what it could deliver, right? Forget about the distribution, which I agree with you on the phones. So part of it is that. And I think now you're starting, some of the greatest marketers in the world are now working for tech companies. So that's changing.
We're almost out of time, but one other quick question. And identify yourself, please.
way you mentioned the early HBO original content, like, you know, the Showtime also like programs and stuff like that. What happens if these, right now we're putting a lot of faith in original content with like Netflix and so forth. What happens if there's a couple of big headline failures? Like if they did the Kevin Spacey thing, but it turned out to be terrible, or everybody hated it. Because that hasn't happened yet. I mean, I haven't seen like a big bet that went bad, but it's gone.
The water world of OTT, huh? Or pay TV.
Arrested Development, I thought went
Yeah,
pretty bad.
right.
And you know what? If it is a failure, you'll never know. Because
Arrested
Netflix
Development-
won't tell you either.
That wasn't quite as expensive,
No,
the way they
it wasn't.
produced that, and they
That's
kept actors in only a certain number of those episodes.
It's a great point, and it's happened. It's happened in other media type, right? It's happened. Do you guys remember a few years ago, YouTube came out and said we're going to give $200 million to Hollywood to come up with like the best Hollywood talent-driven channels. Still didn't beat Michelle Phan, who like did it for no money, right? So you know what happened? They're like, okay, that didn't work. So they didn't go away, but they're not spending as much. And on the OTT space, it's actually, I know you're kind of tongue in cheek about that, but that is kind of the case. By the time it hits, certainly the media and Hollywood press, it's already kind of a big deal, right? And Hollywood is sort of a town or the content space. Like if this Adam Sandler thing doesn't work. So one of the great things is Netflix doesn't share anything about anything to anyone that's not in their favor, right? Even the content owners don't even know who watches their content. Like the studios don't even know who's watching their content. So, and by the way, we don't really know. We have to back into how many users watch House of Cards. Okay, we kind of are close to that, but I'm sure if we're off by a multiple, we're probably off. Netflix isn't going to say anything, right? So if this Adam Sandler thing, which some people are saying is a horrible investment, and other people are saying it's a horrible investment, if that doesn't work, you're not going to hear about it. They're not going to tell you about it. So, but I do think a lot of people, if investments don't work, you'll see money pulled back. I absolutely think that's the case.
And I guess that's the last word. I was going to ask, you know, we often is a futuristic question. What do you think will be going on in X years? But 25 years is so
25
far
years.
out, I don't think
That's
we're
right.
going to go with that. So I do
It'll
want
all
to
be great in
thank
25
the
years.
panelists, and please join me in thanking them, and thank you all for enduring this and hopefully enjoying it as well.
That was fun.